Okay, let's dive right into this explainer by picturing a guy named Leo. It's 7:14 in the morning. Leo's sitting in his bathroom wearing the exact same gym shorts he's owned since 2019. He's brushing his teeth and, just scrolling through his brokerage app, a habit he's literally had for the last 23 years. But this morning is different. The number on the screen has an extra comma, 7 figures. He has officially crossed $1 million invested. So he stares at the screen, he tilts his phone, refreshes the app, and the comma is still there. And then Leo does something that the movies absolutely never show you. He doesn't cry. He doesn't go wake up his wife. He doesn't pop a bottle of champagne. He just looks at the screen and says, okay. And then he goes right back to brushing his teeth. Now, you might be thinking, no way, that's crazy. But actually, this wildly anticlimactic reaction is the mathematically correct response. Today, we're going to unpack exactly why the Hollywood version of being a millionaire is a complete myth, and what that number actually means in the real world today. So here is our roadmap for the explainer today. 1. The anticlimactic milestone. 2. The reality of quiet wealth. 3. The math of compounding. 4. Essential logistical steps. And 5. Preserving long-term freedom. Let's kick things off with section 1, the anticlimactic milestone. Why $1 million isn't the finish line. To really understand this, we have to address the giant elephant in the room, which is inflation. The word millionaire has been hammered into our culture for over a century, right? But the financial script just hasn't updated to match reality. Think about it. $1 million back in 1960 gave you the equivalent purchasing power of about $11 million today. Even in 1990, it was worth roughly $2.5 million. Literally, the word millionaire has lost roughly 91% of its original punch over the decades. So it's really no wonder that crossing the milestone feels so completely different today than it did for our parents or grandparents. And because of this math, the reality on the ground is honestly pretty shocking. In a 2025 Northwestern Mutual study of actual U.S. millionaires, meaning people who already have over $1 million in investable assets, 64% of them reported that they do not feel wealthy. That's almost 2 out of every 3 millionaires. And this completely proves it isn't just false modesty, It's a direct reflection of our current economic environment. This data tracks directly with our constantly shifting goalposts, which is a psychological concept called hedonic adaptation. Charles Schwab's survey shows the average American now believes it takes $2.3 million just to be considered wealthy. And if you live in a place like San Francisco, that jumps up to $4.4 million. In Empower's 2025 data, people actually feel they need $5.3 million to feel financially successful. That is over 5 times the traditional benchmark. We are literally just constantly moving the finish line on ourselves. Which brings us to section 2, the reality of quiet wealth, the Camry versus the BMW. So what does a millionaire actually look like on an average American street? Well, if you walk down a block with 100 houses, about 18 might have a millionaire inside. But out of those, only about 5 got there by consistently investing over decades. We've got this super flashy public perception of wealth, but a massive study of 10,000 millionaires by Ramsey Solutions found that real millionaires are actually driving Toyotas and Hondas. That guy in the leased BMW with a flashy chrome grille, he's very likely house rich and cash poor. Meanwhile, the guy with a cool $1 million invested is the one driving a 10-year-old Camry with a dented bumper. True wealth is quiet. It isn't screaming for attention. And there is a super practical reason they aren't out buying sports cars. It's the brutal math of dividends. If you imagine yourself just sipping coffee on a Tuesday, living purely off the interest of your $1 million, well, think again. A 1.06% yield on the S&P 500, which was the rate in May 2026, pays out just $29 a day on a $1 million portfolio. You literally cannot even buy a Chipotle bowl with guacamole and a drink on that income. Living strictly off dividend yield with $1 million is just a mathematical fantasy today. When we look at responsible withdrawal strategies, the reality becomes even clearer. If our guy Leo uses a modernized version of the famous 4% rule, which is currently calculated by Morningstar at 3.9%, he can pull about $39,000 a year. Let's really put that in context. It's a nice supplement for sure. It's about 1.6 times the average Social Security check. But $39,000 a year for a family of 4, that is hovering right near the federal poverty line. $1 million offers an absolutely incredible safety net, but it doesn't buy you a mansion in Beverly Hills. Oh, and we definitely can't forget about Leo's hidden roommate, the IRS. Because Leo used a traditional 401k to build his wealth, a whole quarter of his $1 million actually belongs to the government. When he withdraws it in retirement, it gets taxed as ordinary income at a blended rate of around 25%. So his millionaire status, it actually leaves him with about $750,000 in spendable cash. If he had used a Roth account, it would be a full tax-free million. The vehicle you use to save completely changes the reality of your net worth. All right, Section 3, the math of compounding, the snowball effect. Now, the reality of taxes and withdrawal rates might sound a little discouraging, I know, but this is exactly where the math violently shifts in your favor. The late Charlie Munger, Warren Buffett's longtime business partner, famously said that the first $100,000 is an absolute beast. You literally have to scrape and save however you can. But after that, this snowball starts rolling on its own. Now, if we adjust that for inflation, the benchmark is closer to $200,000 or $300,000 today, but the principle is totally identical. It completely validates the grueling median timeline of 25 to 30 years it takes most everyday people to reach their first million. To really grasp why this snowball effect is so incredibly powerful, we need to quickly define the Rule of 72. This is a brilliant, simple little formula used to estimate how long it takes your money to double. All you do is divide the number 72 by your annual interest rate. This perfectly explains the mechanics of how Leo's unceremonious, quiet wealth is about to explode on total autopilot. Assuming an 8% real return, Leo's money is going to double every 9 years. Think about that for a second. It took him 23 long years of grinding, saving, and ignoring market panics just to build his first million. But it will only take 9 years for that to double to $2 million, and he has to do absolutely nothing. No new contributions. And going from 2 to 4 million? Just another 9 years. Compounding accelerates your wealth growth so fast once you cross this threshold. The grinding finally becomes optional. Moving on to Section 4, essential logistical steps, defending the million. Reaching this stage means your responsibilities completely shift. Like we said, hitting $1 million isn't about popping champagne. It is entirely about executing immediate defensive logistics to protect what you've spent decades building. First up, you absolutely need an umbrella liability insurance policy. A $1 million coverage policy only costs about $200 to $400 a year, but it acts as a massive shield. Because once you actually have assets, you suddenly become a target for lawsuits. Second, you must establish the boring but absolutely vital estate documents, a will, a trust, and powers of attorney. And finally, you have to adjust your asset allocation. So why adjust your allocation? Well, it's because of something called sequence of returns risk. This is basically the danger of experiencing a major market downturn right at the very beginning of your retirement. If the market drops 30% in year 1 and you are withdrawing funds at the exact same time to live on, it permanently damages your portfolio's ability to sustain you. Suddenly, those boring bonds aren't just for super conservative investors anymore. They completely transform into vital insurance to protect your timeline and your entire lifestyle. And that brings us to Section 5, preserving long-term freedom, the 2 a.m. peace of mind. If you want to actually keep the wealth you have just secured, we have to look closely at psychology. The single most vital statistic from that massive Ramsey study is this: 94% of millionaires live on less than they make. They relentlessly avoid lifestyle inflation. That is the ultimate secret to preserving your freedom. Because the exact second your spending catches up to your growing portfolio, that freedom you spent decades building, it just gets quietly repossessed. So let's bring Leo's reality to life. What does being a millionaire actually feel like on a random Tuesday? True wealth isn't a private jet. It is the quiet, everyday superpower of handling sudden life emergencies without your heart rate even going up. It's handing over your credit card for a $400 emergency vet bill without having to do frantic mental math first. It's instantly replacing an $1,800 broken water heater for your mom without flinching. But most importantly, it is the beautiful, absolute silence when that 2 a.m. voice in your head, the one that used to do panicked mortgage math in the dark, finally stops. The anxiety is completely replaced by a permanent financial buffer. Which brings us to the ultimate question you really have to ask yourself today. Are you chasing a flashy public lifestyle, or are you actually building toward that quiet 2 a.m. peace of mind? Because as we've seen, the math is totally clear, the logistical steps are laid out, and the choice is entirely up to you. Thank you so much for joining me in this explainer. I really hope this gives you a whole new perspective on your own financial journey. Keep building that snowball.